I'm Brandi Kruse. Welcome to Undivided. Thank you for being here on this Friday. Thank you for your continuing commitment to give common sense a comeback. And for those of you who are subscribers, thank you for helping to support this movement of ours. If you're not a subscriber already, you can do that in two ways at patreon.com/undivided or by becoming a contributor on my locals community, brandikruse.locals.com. Our platform is growing by the day, and I appreciate all of you who have been part of that. Undivided is presented by our founding sponsor, 1530 Mortgage. You can visit them at 1530mortgage.com. We've got a few things to get to today, a jam-packed show. We're going to talk about Ron DeSantis down in Florida arresting murderers and sex offenders for committing voter fraud. We'll talk about it in our weekly segment, Florida Report. Also, a North Dakota school board decided to do away with the Pledge of Allegiance. And then after quite a bit of backlash, some of it pretty nasty, they voted to reinstate it. There was a nice little gem of civility tucked into this story that I wanted to talk about, but I also wanted to use it as an opportunity to share my strong opinions about the Pledge of Allegiance, an opinion you might not agree with. First, I want to talk about a segment I watched last night on Tucker Carlson on Fox News. I don't watch Tucker a lot. I agree with some of the things he says. I don't necessarily always agree with him, and I don't always agree with the way in which he says things. But he opened his show last night with a segment and really a few thoughts that I think every single Republican politician, Republican candidate, Republican voter, would-be Republican voter needs to hear. The general takeaway of the segment is that Republicans should be doing very well right now in the lead up to the midterms, but frankly, they're not.
Not even close. In fact, all the indications we have right now suggest that despite Joe Biden's well-earned unpopularity, the Democratic Party still, again, as of tonight, has a strong chance of holding Congress in November. The prediction markets, which many believe are more accurate than the polls, overwhelmingly point to the Democrats keeping at least one chamber. And maybe strangest of all, as of this week, Democrats are leading Republicans nationally on the so-called generic ballot by about 4 points. So if you ask people which party do you like more, they say Democrats. And maybe that's why Democrats are raising a lot more money, too. And not just money from their patrons in big tech, but from small dollar donors. That's bad.
So I'm going to get into what my diagnosis of this issue is, and I'll share what Tucker Carlson thinks that Republicans need to do to turn this around. There's a little bit of overlap between the two of us, but I think we find fault and blame in fundamentally two different places. Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader, came out. There's this clip of him going around that talks about the fact that he doesn't believe Republicans will retake the Senate. Or that it'll be less likely for them to retake the Senate than to retake the House. And here's what Mitch McConnell said about that.
There's probably a greater likelihood the House flips than the Senate. Candidate quality has a lot to do with the outcome.
So I agree that in some instances it's the quality of the candidate, but that is directly tied to the quality of their messaging and what they're choosing to focus on. Let's go to the state of Pennsylvania. There's a high-profile Senate race there. Dr. Mehmet Oz, Dr. Oz, is running on the Republican side, and he's had a couple of videos as of late that are frankly a joke.
I did some grocery shopping. I'm at Wegner's, and my wife wants some vegetables for crudité, right? So here's a broccoli. That's $2. Not a ton of broccoli there. There's some asparagus. That's $4. Yep. And carrots. That's $4 more. That's $10 of vegetables there. And then we need some guacamole. That's $4 more. And she loves salsa. Yeah, there's salsa there. $6. Must be a shortage of salsa. Guys, that's $20 for crudité, and this doesn't include the tequila. I mean, that's outrageous. And we got Joe Biden to thank for this.
It's hard to sound more disconnected than to talk about the cost of crudité. And I had to Google crudité, and I consider myself to be a little bit bougie, and I didn't even know what that was. But it's not just this silly little video in the grocery store. Dr. Oz's team put out what I believe is probably the worst campaign ad I have ever seen targeting his Democratic opponent.
Now that John Fetterman claims to be recovering, let's pull back his hoodie and examine what's in his head. Looks like he has some screws loose. What's this? Fetterman wants to release 1/3 of all prisoners. That's crazy! Spend more tax dollars, everything will cost more. That's nuts. Slow energy production, gas prices will skyrocket. That's ridiculous. Socialized medicine? Where do you get these crazy ideas? Now it makes sense. Better close it up. John Fetterman is crazier than you think.
Dr. Mehmet Oz is an example of a larger issue with Republican politicians and Republican candidates that's going on right now. Republicans are failing to meet the seriousness of the moment. When I see those two videos from Dr. Oz, he seems like a joke. He seems unserious at a time that is deadly serious in our country. When Americans are struggling financially, when crime is absolutely out of control, when we have hundreds of thousands of people flooding into our country along the southern border. All of that going on, and you have candidates that are a joke.
Let's pull back his hoodie and examine what's in his head. Looks like he has some screws loose. What's this?
And it's not just Dr. Oz. Kari Lake, the Republican candidate for governor in Arizona, talking about big dick energy, referring to other Republican politicians.
The guy has bigger... Okay. Wait, let me think about how I want to word this. My staff always says, whatever you do, do not say balls. So I'm not going to say it. I'll tell you what he's got. I don't know if you heard of this, but he's got BDE. Anybody know what that means? Ask your kids about it later.
Again, Republicans need to meet the seriousness of the moment. And that is what they're failing to do. Now, you might say, well, Brandi, there are some really bad Democratic candidates as well. There are, but there are none out there who are just straight up acting like clowns. Now, their ideas might be funny. Their platforms might be a joke. But they're not out there acting unserious about the challenges facing our country. They're not airing completely bizarre, idiotic campaign ads that have nothing to do with the problems facing our country.
Looks like he has some screws loose. What's this?
They don't have gubernatorial candidates talking about big dick energy.
My staff always says, whatever you do, do not say balls.
So yes, it is a candidate quality issue. And yes, it is a messaging issue. But it's also a maturity issue. This is a serious time for Americans. You know, Tucker Carlson's diagnosis for this is that Republicans need to be laser focused on two issues, which really are the same issue, the crime crisis domestically and also the issue along the southern border. And I don't disagree with Tucker Carlson that Republicans need to get their messaging on point. They need to focus on the problems that have worsened under Democrats and need to offer solutions to those problems. But if they can't do that with an ounce of seriousness,
whatever you do, do not say balls.
Those are things that might ingratiate you to a certain segment of your base, but they don't translate to competency. And I'm sorry, when you're an American that's struggling financially, can't pay for gas, can't pay for food, you're going to prioritize competency. Because when you're acting like everything's a big joke, things are deathly serious for them. So if Republican candidates want to win, it's time that they start acting like it. Speaking of crime and public safety, we've been focusing a lot on efforts in the city of Seattle to deal with things like repeat criminal offenders, to deal with some of the, in a lot of cases, low-level street crime that is eroding the quality of life in the city's core. We've had on a few times the new City Attorney Ann Davison, who shocked the world by being elected as a Republican in the city of Seattle. She has been giving us updates on her efforts to deal with the massive case backlog that was left by her predecessor, and also to try to make sure that victims are actually getting justice in the city of Seattle. She joined me for another update. And welcome back to Undivided. I appreciate you being here because the last time we spoke, you talked about two things, that you were going to work on the backlog and that you were going to work on speeding up filing decisions. And you promised to be transparent about whether what you were doing was working. So here you are to give us an update on things. You released a Q2 report earlier this week. Tell me the big picture takeaway from your office.
Well, we did release a report, Q2 of 2022, to let us know and let the public know what we were doing and how it is going. And the first step really is that we have this report. It is important for the public to understand that this information was not readily available. We built this since I joined in this office, and we decided to build a data and transparency team. So we have done the data mining and created this report from the really archaic systems that are here, so that we can understand what had been happening in the past, so we can then make smart decisions going forward to improve public safety.
Yeah, it's nice to have the report and not to have to wonder about what's happening. What are you proud of in this report? Let's start there, well, on a high note.
On a high note, I think the report gives us really a very thorough picture of public safety here at the misdemeanor level. And what I want to do particularly is reinstill real-time accountability in the criminal justice system in the city of Seattle. And so to me, understanding our own internal processes, what I can control, what we can control within the criminal division, is the biggest part that we can do here at the city attorney's office. So understanding what is happening for those accused of a crime, in addition to the victims, understanding who is impacted by misdemeanor crimes is very important. My focus has always been to recenter victims in this public safety system. They have been left out of the conversation for too long, in my opinion. And so that is what we are doing by providing this report with a full picture, understanding from the data perspective what's happening. And then I couple that with my going out into the community at the street level to listen and to hear and understand, are we making a difference? We have a long way to go. It took us a long time as a city to get here. So this is where we're at, and we will continue with this so we can improve that from our end.
So you said you're restoring real-time accountability. Does that mean you're making filing decisions, charging decisions more quickly? And if so, can you quantify that for me?
To me, real-time accountability means that we need to make sure what we do is responsive. And the average for the past 5 years, it took 129 days just to make a decision. We have reduced that down to 3 days for a 98% reduction, which to me is focus on our internal processes, what we can do to improve that. The response needs to be made more timely when we get that Seattle Police referral. And we've brought that down to 3 days, and that is impactful.
Now, just because you're doing it more quickly doesn't mean you're charging more people. Can you help me understand when you say you're making decisions within 3 days? What is the option? What are the options for what qualifies as a decision?
A decision is, what will our response be? We are looking at, should we be filing charges? Should we be diverting? Should we be declining? What we are doing is making sure victims understand what happened to them is important. And what an important part for me is we have seen an increase in victim and witness participation because of our responsiveness in our decision making, and in particular in domestic violence. We have seen an increase in victim participation. When we had to decline cases in Q2 of 2021, we had a decline rate of 27% because of a lack of survivor participation. We have brought that down to 8%. So to me, that this means that this is a meaningful change internally that helps survivors of domestic violence. And domestic violence is important because it is one of the main indicators of other violence and community violence in the future.
Now, the data does show an actual uptick in the number of cases that were declined, an uptick of 21% from Q1 of this year and an uptick of 46% from Q2 of 2021, so the same period last year. If I'm reading this correctly, you're attributing the increase in declined cases to some of the backlog cases that you had to decline. Is that correct?
That's correct. Our decline rate is such because we are going through that 5,000 case backlog that I inherited when I took office in January. And we've gotten through 900 of those cases so far. It is important that we do that as much as we can, but we do want to stay focused also on recent referrals that are coming in now. Again, the goal is to restore real-time accountability in the misdemeanor criminal justice system in the city of Seattle.
And so are you, with the cases that you've declined, that kind of led to a little bump in declined cases this quarter, what cases are you declining from that backlog and why?
Most of them would be because, again, the evidence has been left to linger. Time was squandered, again, in that decision-making process, which is why we looked at internal processes. What can we control? Not what are others doing, but what can we within the city attorney's office do to improve what we do? And that is one aspect of it, is to make a decision earlier so that then the evidence can be focused upon. When things were left in the past for months before a decision was made, victims and witnesses were receiving the message that what happened to them wasn't important. They may not want to participate. Why bother? We want to get rid of that. And we've done that by changing it to a 3-day response time. So they understand the messages. What happened to you, victim, is important. And we are here and we are listening to you.
You mentioned that you've been going out, talking to folks. I know you've always sort of talked to business owners who for a long time felt like their voice didn't matter. I know you've been out talking to police officers. Are they seeing a difference in at the street level in what it means when you file cases and there's some real-time accountability? What are they telling you?
When I go out in the community, I do hear a variety of things, and it's important because it did take us a long time to get to this place as a city. A lot of decision makers before me made a lot of decisions, and over time we've gotten to this place. So I think we are making some improvements. I hear a sense of hopefulness. I know that from victims, when we have this 3-day response time now, that is empowering to them, that the sense of hopelessness is starting to fade. There's a sense of hopefulness. And that is important. But again, we do still see there's a long time that we will need to have to improve all of it. I was out in the International District just a few days ago, and it's still really difficult for many areas of our city. So it will take some time to improve, but we are at it and we are going to not stop.
I think a lot of the crimes that are really leading to kind of a degradation of quality of life, particularly in the downtown area, are misdemeanors that do wind up in your office. So in that sense, your office gives us sort of a little insight into what's happening in the city. What kind of cases are you seeing referred to your office by SPD with some level of frequency? What kind of crimes?
I really focus on, again, the overall amount of what we are seeing in referrals and less so on the actual types. That's more where my criminal chief is my subject matter expert, and all of our unit supervisors. It's important to note the criminal division has been really focused on victims for a long time and wanting to center their stories and to reach out for them. And I think it was really a lack of leadership that didn't allow that beforehand. And so for me, it really is letting them do their work and highlighting their work, and that they have always been focused on victims. Now they are allowed to do so under me, and it's important. Their work matters so much, as well as the police officers. When they sent that referral over to us, they need to know that we're here at the ready to respond, and the victims see that we are also here to respond.
Okay, so you're not sure what kind of cases that you're seeing come into your office?
We have all the ones that we've talked about. That is theft, that is trespass, that is assault. It is all the ones that are listed before. That's what we have. But it's important to note that there are a lot of issues that we are seeing. We are the ones that help on the misdemeanor level to bring back that real-time accountability. I focus more so on what is the process that we can do to improve. And when we are looking at the number of thefts, the number of shoplifts, the number of trespass, the number of assaults, I'm looking at all of that overall. And particularly when we're looking at domestic violence, what is that number? And then related to gun violence. So those are the main ones that I'm seeing and that I focus on.
One line in this report that really caught my attention was that the number of current referrals that you're getting from the Seattle Police Department is below pre-COVID levels and lower than before the loss of a significant number of SPD officers. How do you account for that? What do you think's going on? Because I mean, by all accounts, crime is up. So why are we seeing fewer referrals than we were before a significant loss of police officers?
Well, that would just be my observation, because I don't necessarily know exactly what they're doing. I don't direct the police, but it's important that I have that collaborative working relationship with them. I think that now when they see that what we are doing matters, and we are saying to them their work matters, that's important. And it may be that there's a lower number of officers, so we are not getting the number of referrals. It may have been that before there was a higher number and they thought that no one was here prosecuting, so why bother? Again, I'm wanting to get rid of that why bother mentality and focus on how can we do it better. So that's where we are focused here in the criminal division. We are standing at the ready when we get those referrals from SPD, and if they are prosecutable, we will pursue those.
And I'm sorry, I'm an idiot. I read that line and it didn't quite sink in. Now it makes sense. So the fewer referrals now than when SPD had more staffing, which makes sense. I read it kind of backwards. So you know what? Just ignore that last question. I want to end with this, Ann. One of the other things that we had talked about earlier in the year was this focus on what the media refers to as repeat offenders. I think you had a different phrase for them. Maybe you can remind me of what that is. But you had some buy-in from other elements of the criminal justice system to sort of book those people into jail and to make sure that there's a little bit of pause from their criminal activity. How is that going? Because I know the jail is still not accepting certain people. The jail is short-staffed. Can you update us on that to close with?
Yes, we did launch the High Utilizer Initiative earlier this year, and to talk about people that are having a high impact in the community. A small number of people are engaged in a disproportionate amount of criminal activity at the misdemeanor level in the city of Seattle. And that is sometimes creating repeat victims even. So it's really important to understand what's happening so we can let the community have a break from that activity. It's not okay. Our laws need to mean something. They are our values as a society. We are seeing improvement on that. I know in the North End that's been seeing a lot of relief because of this initiative. It's impactful on communities. It's been helping us be better stewards of public resources so we can understand what's happening for those individuals and listening to victims who have been at the other end of that criminal activity. It's been an important program and one that's been helpful for the city, in my opinion.
Actually, one question to end on. You sent this letter to Councilwoman Lisa Herbold, who is the chair of the Public Safety Committee. She is someone who supported police defunding. She's someone who tried to introduce legislation that would have basically made all misdemeanor crimes legal if you claim the poverty defense. Do you think the councilwoman's going to be happy that you guys are charging more people and maybe making decisions on cases faster?
Well, of course, you'd have to ask her about her opinion, but I think that really the goal is talking about what is happening to victims, because victims are all types of people, and including our most vulnerable, and they are likely to be a victim of crime more so. So it's important that we do talk about misdemeanor prosecution, and it does need to have alternatives at our disposal for the various tools of prosecution. But it's important that we are centering victims in the story, and they need to be recentered, in my opinion, because they had not been part of that conversation in the past.
All right, Seattle City Attorney Ann Davison, we appreciate you coming back to us with an update.
It's good to talk to you, Brandi. Thank you.
Now, one of the things that Ann Davison's office pointed out to me after this interview, because I asked that dumb question about, well, if there's fewer officers, but why are they referring fewer cases? Because I just got confused. But one thing they pointed out is even though there are about 400 fewer officers on the force than there were a few years ago, that they are now referring about just a little less, but about the same number of cases. And to me, that speaks volumes, because I talked to officers under the old city attorney, Pete Holmes, that had just sort of thrown their hands up and said, well, he's not going to charge anything anyway. I had been on ride-alongs where we were witnessing crimes in progress, and they're like, that's not something Pete Holmes will charge, so why bother? So the fact that you have 400 fewer officers, but they're sending almost as much cases to the city attorney's office, to me, says that these officers now believe that these cases are going to go somewhere, that if they spend a couple hours on paperwork, if they go out and actually contact subjects, that those cases are going to go somewhere. And I think that's how you really get back into proactive police work and how you can start to build an environment at the Seattle Police Department where you can rebuild the ranks as well. So that's really good news. It's Friday, you know what that means. We check in on what's happening in the Sunshine State. It's our segment, Florida Report.
It's not even controversial anymore.
People know in Florida their freedoms are going to be respected.
And joining us is our diligent Florida correspondent at her house. My sister Miranda, I feel like this should be called DeSantis Report because we like always start with a Ron DeSantis story. What do you got?
Yeah, he is the Florida man. CBS News reports Florida Governor Ron DeSantis' election force announces arrest of 20 for voter fraud. Republican Florida Governor Ron DeSantis announced that 20 people who voted in the 2020 elections will be arrested and charged for breaking the state's election laws on felon voter rights. Basically, in 2018, the good citizens of Florida, we voted to reinstate voting rights to certain felons. This does not include rapists and murderers, among, I think, some other violent offenders. And this is just kind of like the opening to going after people who commit voter fraud. And, you know, it's only 20 people, but these 20 people, mainly out of Broward and Miami-Dade counties, they did vote without having gone through any process to reinstate their voting rights. And they were convicted murderers and rapists. And they are going to face the consequences for, you know, voting when they shouldn't be voting.
Yeah, I love this. And this is something everyone should support, because when you talk about one of my biggest complaints about how individuals cover like the big lie, you know, the stolen election. I don't believe the election was stolen, but we can't discount the fact that there are always cases of voter fraud, and the government needs to go after them aggressively to dissuade other people from committing fraud. And so, yeah, if sex offenders and murderers are voting in Florida that aren't supposed to be, like the left and the right should be celebrating Ron DeSantis for this.
Absolutely. And I think that it also, it kind of contributes to giving people a little more faith in the system. Like, how can people who think there is voter fraud have any sort of faith regained if they don't see anybody who's committing it being held responsible? And I do think that, like, if there is widespread voter fraud that's thwarting elections and changing results, it's not happening on an individual basis. And it's probably happening on a larger scale, but every member of that scale of voter fraud needs to be addressed. It all needs to be taken care of. And if we have to start with small and work our way up, then I think that that's a great place to start. And DeSantis actually put together almost like a police force for voter fraud. And the Florida legislation passed and let him create this team. And I think every state needs a little team to make sure that our democracy is being protected.
Yeah, I love it. I think it does do a lot to restore faith in the process, to know that people are out there looking at these things. Another DeSantis story, this one's a follow-up. So we talked on Florida Report a couple weeks ago about how there's a teacher shortage in Florida. A lot of states are experiencing that. And Ron DeSantis cleared the way for veterans to be able to teach in schools without sort of having to go through the traditional avenues. And now he's looking to expand that to other professions.
Yeah, he is. The Miami Herald is kind of giving us a little rundown on this. They report DeSantis wants cops and other first responders to help fill teaching vacancies. After giving military veterans easier access to temporary teaching certificates, Governor Ron DeSantis on Tuesday said he wants state legislatures to expand that same option for law enforcement officers and other first responders for the next year. The article kind of goes on to just say that he thinks these people have served our communities, some of them for years and years and years, and they have a lot to offer. And I do think that bringing these people who serve our communities outside the schools into the schools to lend a helping hand, I think that it creates, just like we talked about before, I think that it solves a problem. It boosts morale. It creates like a bridge between these first responders, these police officers, and kids in the communities. I still can't find a single thing wrong with it.
Yeah, and I'm very supportive of law enforcement. I will say, however, I kind of want to know what they're going to be teaching and to what extent are they qualified in whatever, subject matter because they're not going to go in there and teach law enforcement tactics, to kids. No. So I want to know, like, are you making sure that they're qualified to be teaching what they're teaching? Like, to me, it's not enough just to have served in uniform when it comes to, just plopping someone into school. I mean, I obviously agree with him that they've served the community for a long time. If they want a second career in teaching, we should make that readily accessible to them. But I do, I guess, have some questions about, okay, what are their teaching qualifications, if that makes sense?
Absolutely. And going back to with the veterans, when we talked about this a couple of weeks back, there's still qualifications, there's still educational standards that need to be met with these individuals to ensure that they do know what they're talking about when they come into school and teach your kids. But they shouldn't be counted out just because they've had another career for so long. Everybody gets an opportunity, should get an opportunity to change winds and decide they want to do something else. And I mean, people who police officers, they see that a lot of these kids grow up, they know who these kids are in communities, and retired police officers, I think they would love the opportunity to serve at a little bit more of a developmental place in the community.
Yeah, and I'm not discounting their ability to be teachers. I just want to make sure, I think standards in schools have been slipping a little bit lately. And so I have no doubt that they can be, and many of them probably are qualified to be in schools. I just want to make sure there's a consistent standard. Let's end with, we usually end with a Florida man story, but you have a Florida woman story of a chick in Florida who is batshit crazy, and I love this story.
Yes. So NDTV is reporting on a Florida woman who's been arrested for calling 911 more than 12,000 times simply to abuse officers and waste everybody's time.
But by abuse officers, what do you mean?
So the article talks about how she calls and just harasses and belittles whoever picks up the phone. She just lets all her opinions out every time somebody answers looking to help somebody with an emergency. She's just there with all types of time on her hands and all types of really nasty things to say to first responders. She never asks for help. There's never anything wrong. She's just apparently very, very angry at 911. I don't know, at just first responders in general. So she spends her time doing that. She has been arrested. So
she's probably not going to like them anymore now that she got arrested.
Yeah, I don't think that that's going to end this cycle. I mean, they do say that she has a long criminal history, so maybe she's got some animosity towards them based on her own past. But for now, she will not be able to call 911 and harass them while she's locked up. So
yeah, unless she uses her one phone call a day. I wonder if you could call 911 from the county jail.
Can you imagine? Oh, well, I'll follow up. And I also, I did want to have some answers for you guys on the snake hunt, but they have not scheduled the press conference for the winners yet, which I don't know why. I mean, I suppose it's not breaking news, but I'm very curious. But it has ended. It ended on Sunday. The hunt ended on Sunday of last week. So hopefully I can get back to you guys with how big the snakes were and how many they caught.
Yeah, we want to know the winners and losers of Florida's snake hunt. So maybe, I know when Ron DeSantis kicked it off, he held one of those big snakes. And so maybe he'll hold the dead one, or they'll make him some boots or something. I don't know.
Seems like Ron's onto new snakes. So
yes, he is. All right, Miranda, we appreciate it.
Goodbye.
It's not even controversial anymore.
People know in Florida their freedoms are going to be respected.
As some of you know, on Undivided, we have a Charity of the Year that's voted on at the beginning of the year by Undivided subscribers. This year, they selected Brigadoon Service Dogs to be our first Charity of the Year. Brigadoon Service Dogs is an organization in Washington State that helps to train service dogs for veterans, for kids and other adults who might need them. Here's a video that we put together on the organization back in February.
Hello, Angel. Oh my gosh, look at your big melon.
There are few things that bring us together, quite like dogs.
They don't judge like people judge. They love you unconditionally, 24/7. They don't care what you look like. They don't care what kind of mood you're in. They don't care what kind of bad day. When you come home, that dog's gonna put a smile on your face. Good boy, release. Hi, Elliot. There you go, good boy.
Perhaps that's why Denise has dedicated her life to them.
I've been training dogs ever since I can remember. I just didn't do it professionally until later on in life. My first collie, I would think I was 3rd grade, and I grew up in a generation of Lassie. And then in the 8th grade, I got another collie, and I would try to figure out how I could train her to do all those neat things that Lassie did. you know? And so I've just always had an interest in, and I was a weird kid and I didn't, you know, I was oddball and I didn't have friends and my dog was my friend. And so it was just me and her. Heel. Side. Good boy.
After a career showing dogs, Denise had an idea. She wondered whether she could train her collie, named Brigadoon, to be a service dog for her mom.
I was looking at him one day and I said, you know, I bet I could train you to be a balance dog for mom when she comes up here. So as conversation went with my husband and what have you, I just decided I was going to close my pet dog training business and do service dogs, not knowing what in the world the future would bring for me.
"18 years later, the walls at Brigadoon's service dogs in Bellingham tell the stories of all the dogs they've trained, and of course, all their humans. Veterans, children, and adults who rely on those dogs to help them live a more full and rewarding life.
If I fall, I'm just gonna put myself on the ground for this, but if I fall, it's not easy for me to get back up unless I have something to hold on to. So I use him. Jeffy, brace. Jeff, brace. Good boy. There you go. See, now it's easy for me to get back up.
My name is Earl Helmick, Desert Storm and Iraqi Freedom veteran. The moment I really felt I needed a service dog is when I was talking with my psychologist, and they were wanting to keep me on all these different drugs, and I really didn't want the drugs. I wanted to kind of return to normal and do it without medication. And having a service dog helped me achieve that.
Before I had my service dog, I was actually in fear a lot of falling. I found my life getting smaller and smaller and choosing not to go do things. And in this day and age, you can have everything delivered. You never have to go out anymore. And that makes for a pretty small life. Since I got my service dog brother, what has happened is I feel brave enough to go out and participate in things.
Look behind you quick. I know you probably look at that wall a lot.
Oh, I do, especially when I'm down and I want to give up. I look at all these pictures and all the people that I've helped, that we have helped, Brigadoon and my staff. And there's some veterans up here that I've gotten very close to. There's one that I'm still in touch with that's waiting for his dog next month. He gets it. It's a white husky named Stout, and he lives in Eastern Washington. And I'm in touch with him weekly. We send each other pictures and, you know, smiley faces, and because he's tried to commit suicide before. You know, some of our teenagers, I have 3 of them in mind, had cerebral palsy. I met them when they were like in junior high, going into high school. And they're going away to college out of state now and stuff because of their dog. They couldn't have done that before. They depended on their parents. Can you imagine being a sophomore in high school, walking around with a walker, and because you can't walk without it, and the kids that tease you, and then you get a dog. Now you're standing a little bit taller, and you and your other friend that has cerebral palsy is now driving. Now you don't have to go shopping with mom anymore. It means a lot.
Changes your life.
Changes your life, totally.
You are so cute. Oh my gosh.
Brigadoon also has several prison programs in Washington where incarcerated veterans help train dogs, and in turn, the dogs help them.
I really like working with the incarcerated veterans a lot. They're a little embarrassed because they're in prison in the first place for some stupid thing they did when they got back from the war that landed them there, and so this is their way of giving back. You know, I mean, they fought for our country, you know, and now they're in prison for whatever they did. And so now this gives them a little bit more structure, and they know a lot of their dogs are training or going to veterans, and it's kind of a win-win situation.
None of these stories would be possible without your help. Brigadoon relies on community donations to cover the cost of each dog.
We are a nonprofit. We depend on the community's contribution. It's $30,000 to produce one single dog, and when we are looking for sponsors for our veteran dogs, we don't charge the veterans for the dogs at all, and we charge 1/3 of that cost to civilians. Small contributions, even a monthly donation of $25 a month helps a lot. Roll. A little enthusiastic.
But if you don't have money to give right now, there are other ways to help give back, especially for dog lovers.
Puppy raising is another thing that we really need help with. If you can't commit to 8 months of puppy raising, because it's a very important part of that service dog's journey, maybe people who are local at least can be a weekend wagger, where that means you come like on a Friday, for example, and take a dog home for the weekend just to give them an in-home experience. We have a litter of puppies. We should be having a litter of puppies here in June. And people can come and cuddle them because they need to be handled.
You mean I can volunteer to cuddle dogs?
Cuddle puppies, yes.
Oh, you are cute. You get 3. There's just something about the bond between dogs and their humans that transcends any divide we might have. Your politics, your income, your race, your ability, none of it matters to them. It's a lesson we could all stand to learn from our best friends. Today for Fridays with Friends, I want to check back in with Denise to see how Brigadoon Service Dogs is doing, get an update on the organization, but also how the current economic situation has impacted their ability to help those in need. Denise, welcome back to Undivided. Thanks for joining us on Fridays with Friends. How are you? How are the dogs?
I am well, Brandi, and thank you for having me on. The dogs are busy right now. We have 13 dogs here prepping for graduation in the end of September and October. So this is when we bring all of our puppies back and evaluate them. And then we start scheduling meet and greets where they actually meet the clients, figuring out which dog goes with what person that's been waiting for us.
How's this current batch? Are you going to have a lot of graduates or anybody flunking out?
There's two of them that are questionable. And we really don't know until we get right into the last, the 12th hour. I hope they will. If they all make it, it'll be 9 dogs. And I'll split those into 2 different classes back to back for the clients.
Do you have kind of a group of people who are waiting right now?
Our biggest group right now are kids, because the kids are the hardest to match up. They, unfortunately, are the ones that are on the wait list the longest. Because like I said, it's harder to match the kids, especially the ones that need a hypoallergenic dog. We don't have that many. We happen to have a few poodles this time, but you usually only have 1 at a time. So, and just because we have 3 or 4 poodles, it doesn't mean that they're going to fit the criteria that needs to be trained for that particular child. And that's, that means they may be put off another year or so until we can get another dog that has the right temperament to be trained for what that person needs.
Yeah. One of the questions I wanted to ask you, because we've been talking a lot on the podcast about the state of the economy. I know just from personal experience, we rely on subscriptions, and it's one of those things where it's like, gosh, that's the first thing that people cut, if they're on a budget. For you guys, how are donations during a tough economic time like this one?
We've experienced the same thing that a lot of nonprofits have, is that it's gone onto a downswing, especially the individual donations. The ones that would normally send in $25 on a monthly basis. Some of those have been cut, and it's expected, I guess, because of the economy and people losing jobs and what have you. But we really do require that. You depend on your subscriptions. We really depend on our donations to be able to produce one single dog. It's almost $30,000. So veterinary bills have to be covered, feeding has to be covered, staff needs to be covered, rent, all of that. And so we try to tell people when they see us out with the puppies, when we're out training or whatever, that if you want to help this puppy along its journey for us to be able to produce another dog, it would be very helpful if you could just send in a monthly payment of whatever fits your budget, even if it's $10. $10 buys a bag of treats.
How do you guys sort of try to reach the community, and besides Undivided, but how are you out there, telling, hey, here's what we do, here's the importance of it, and letting people know about your mission?
We try to do community outreach in Whatcom County, and as well as I'm going to do one in Snohomish County at the fairgrounds. We go into King County occasionally when we're asked, but primarily it's in Whatcom County. So anytime there's any type of events, we try to get a tabling set up with our storyboard and brochures and have a dog or 2 there. And then we can answer questions and try to let them know, have a presence in the community, I guess is the bottom line. Just let them know where we are and invite them out here to meet the dogs, have a tour. We have our big annual fundraiser every year in September, and it's coming up on the 17th this year. We send out, we have a list of people that we send invites to, and we try to collect as much information as we can from people who want to stay involved. And we also have a community quarterly newsletter that is done every quarter, and then an annual event newsletter that goes out at the end of the year.
Now, tell me about your annual event coming up, because is my former Fox 13 colleague, Matt Lorch, is he still helping you guys out with that event?
Yes, he is our favorite auctioneer, and we're really looking forward to this year, 18th year for us to be doing this. And we're going to have some of our graduates there. We're going to have one of the inmates that has gotten out, that formerly trained dogs in prison. So he can talk a little bit about what the prison program meant to him while he was on the inside, so to speak. A lot of our clients will be there with their dogs. And we'll have some puppies there for puppy petting. We have a wonderful dinner, and it's at the Hotel Bellwether, and it's going to be a buffet. Matt Lorch is so dynamite. He makes the evening so much fun. I wish I had his energy.
Is there still time for folks who regular folks who maybe haven't had any connection with Brigadoon? Is there still time and seats left for them to be able to go?
Yes, all they need to do is go to our website, brigadoondogs.org, and click on the auction, and it'll take them to the area to buy a ticket. They can spread the word and bring as many people as they want and have a great time. I mean, a really great time.
And it's my understanding there's also, because for people who can't go, I can't attend this year because I'm going to be out of town, but is there an online auction as well that people can bid on?
Yeah, it's going to start the week before, and there'll be the virtual online auction, and then it's going to go all the way through the next day. The auction's on a Saturday, and it'll close on Sunday at noon. So they'll be able to, I think we have, like 120 items, so they can go online and bid on things at that point, and then just come pick them up on Sunday afternoon or Monday.
Oh, great. And I know that there are going to be some business owners who are listening and watching. You guys take business sponsors. What does that entail from a corporation or a business?
They can start anywhere from $2,500 to the highest that we've had is $10,000. They donate that, and it buys them a table and a name, recognition at the auction. Matt Lorch recognizes them, and then I usually get up and thank everybody, being the founder. And they have their name on the table, and they get to invite guests, and so it's recognition for them too. And then on our website every year we add all of our business sponsors on there, so our business sponsors page grows, and most of them do it year after year, so we really like that.
Well, that's great. Yeah, they get recognition, but they get to help out a great cause. Denise, just to close, explain to people who aren't familiar with your organization just what it means for someone who needs one of these service dogs to finally get one.
It's funny that you bring that up right now, because I had a conversation with one of our clients a day before yesterday, and she was kind of bawling me out a little bit because I don't talk enough, she says, about what a difference these dogs make in somebody's life. She goes, I want you to know that I would not be alive if it wasn't for my dog. She lives alone, and she goes, he enables me to go to the grocery store. Before I got the dog, I always had things delivered to me. He enables me to go to church now where I wouldn't go to church before. So to you, it may not sound like it's that big of a deal. She said, but Denise, I want you to know this dog has given me my life back. And it's because of Brigadoon service dogs. And you need to tell people that. So I'm telling you guys, these dogs make a huge difference in these people's lives, giving them independence again. They don't have to depend on family members like they used to. In her case, she lives alone, so she has a buddy, companionship, which is a huge thing for everybody who has any type of anxiety and loneliness. And that dog goes everywhere with her.
Yeah, it's amazing. Well, thank you so much, Denise, for the work that you guys are doing up there in the community. Appreciate you being on Fridays with Friends, and we'll have you back on again maybe one more time before the end of the year.
Can I do one more plug really quick?
Yes, you can.
We need puppy raisers. And if you're interested in puppy raisers, that's where their journey begins. And that's a very important part of our dogs becoming good service dogs, is having people be trained and willing to foster a dog for us during their first 8 months of their life.
Yeah, you get to see some cute dogs and hang out. Denise, thank you so much for the work you're doing, and I appreciate you taking the time to join us.
Thank you so much for having me.
So again, if you'd like to help our 2022 Charity of the Year, you can do so by visiting brigadoondogs.org. There are a lot of ways you can help. Even if you can't help out financially, there are ways that you can help by volunteering your time or just raising awareness for the organization, maybe sharing some of what they do on your social media accounts. We end Fridays on the show with our segment Understanding America, where we recite or read from an important speech or text in American history. Today I want to do the Pledge of Allegiance because I have a story that goes along with it. I also have some very strong opinions about the Pledge of Allegiance. Before we get to the actual text, some background here. The original Pledge of Allegiance was written by a Union Army officer who had served in the Civil War. It went through several iterations over the years, and eventually the current version was adopted in 1942 by Congress, and they officially named it the Pledge of Allegiance in 1945. And since then, I mean, when I was growing up, we would recite the Pledge of Allegiance in class. It's often something that you do before certain types of events or meetings, etc. So let's just start by reciting the Pledge of Allegiance together, shall we? Cue the patriotic music. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, now that that's behind us, I'm not a huge fan of reciting the Pledge of Allegiance in classrooms. I just think it's a little bit weird to have kids, it's almost like indoctrination. I think there are a lot of things you can do to be a good citizen of the United States without having kids be like, I pledge allegiance to the flag. I'm not a fan of it. I know some of you, that opinion won't be popular. I just think it's a little bit weird. I understand it if you're becoming, for instance, a new citizen to this country, and you recite the Pledge of Allegiance as part of that. You're pledging allegiance to this nation that you have agreed or requested to be part of. I think that's very appropriate. But there was a story that caught my attention that has to do with the Pledge of Allegiance. It caught my attention for two reasons. One, my very strong views on the Pledge of Allegiance, but also because it happened in Fargo, North Dakota, which is near where I grew up. So the school board in Fargo voted a week ago to stop reciting the Pledge of Allegiance at its monthly meetings. Well, they were met with a lot of criticism for this decision. Apparently, they got nasty calls and voicemails from not only the Fargo area, but across the country of people who were furious with their decision to stop reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. So things got so bad that the school board decided to come back to have another vote and decided that, okay, we're going to back off of this. We're going to now recite the Pledge of Allegiance again at our monthly meetings. But there's one school board member who did not back down. Nayamal Day, she's a refugee, fled from Sudan, and she is the only member, the only Black member of the school board. And apparently she received really the most amount of abuse over the initial vote. She played during the meeting some of the really terrible voicemails that she got, and she played those publicly, and they were pretty grotesque. And so she said that she wasn't going to vote to reverse their decision because it would be giving in to all the hate that they received. She wasn't going to bow to pressure. I can respect that decision for her to say, you know what? I'm not gonna change my vote just because people were hateful and nasty to me. But there was one little moment in this that I thought was a really nice moment of civility. There was a veteran, a Vietnam War veteran, who was at the second meeting where they voted to reverse their initial decision. And he went up to this council member afterwards and apologized to her for the kind of hate that she got. Vietnam veteran David Halcrow. There's this great picture of him going up to her in person, even though he's not the one who did any of this, and apologizing to her. He later told the news, what was done to her, those people should be in the clink. If it were up to me, they would be in jail. There's no excuse for that kind of thing. And I agree, David Halcrow, there's no excuse for that kind of thing. We saw a lot of that in Seattle. City Councilwoman Shama Sawant, as much as I disagree with her policies, she was and probably still is subjected to a lot of hate and vitriol. I just don't think that that's ever a productive way to try to influence public policy. It's not any kind of way that we should treat our fellow human beings. So it was interesting to see this sort of debate erupt in near my hometown in Fargo, North Dakota. And it was just a really nice moment for me to see that picture of that Vietnam War veteran going up to that councilwoman and apologizing on behalf of other humans who had treated her really, really poorly. All right, that's it for this episode of Undivided. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your commitment to giving common sense a comeback. If you have not become a subscriber already, but you love the podcast, consider subscribing to help us grow this mission. You can do that in two ways at patreon.com/undivided or by becoming a contributor on my locals community, brandikruse.locals.com. Undivided is presented by our founding sponsor, 1530 Mortgage. You can visit them at 1530mortgage.com.